people who need to see themselves can find themselves in media and know that they're not alone. And a lot of what GLAAD does is tell those stories through the media. So what we wanted to do is bring that power to each person in each of your communities. GLAAD can't be everywhere, but you all are. And these attacks are happening, these book ban challenges are happening in communities across the country. I live in New Jersey, and there's at least 6 different school districts that have had challenges, even in a state that mandates inclusive curriculum. So this isn't something that's a red state problem or a blue state problem. This is an American problem that all of us can speak up against and for the rights of people to see themselves in their books, to see their stories respected and their own lives respected. So thank you, Elisa, for running the slideshow for us. So I also want to shout out my colleague, Jay Moore, who's representing Michigan tonight and all nights, and who really helped me put this together in a really thoughtful, empowering way that pulls together the research with the call to actions and the ways that you can organize your own communities to fight back. So with that, Lisa, if you can go forward one slide.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's okay. Thank you. So this is just a little bit of what you've probably been reading about in the news and in your hometown papers and local school board fights and library fights, just the skyrocketing number of challenges. You can sort of see there was bopping along there steady for some time. And then all of a sudden in 2020, it just bumped tremendously. And then again in 21 and 22. And 90%, this is what's really striking, is 90% of the challenges were attempts on multiple challenges. So multiple titles. So this isn't like a one-off on Toni Morrison's Beloved. This is Beloved, this is Genderqueer, this is Lawn Boy. These are all titles that a select few people empowered challenge. And there are protocols that are supposed to be followed at each of the library boards and school boards. And sometimes there's extremists who are on those boards who are just taking those challenges and moving forward with the bans. And so this is what we're trying to empower each community to fight back against, that you have to be able to show up at your board meetings. You have to be able to know what the protocols are for reviewing these challenges. And you have to be able to speak up with a united front and trying to organize your neighbors and organize your kids' classmates and parents to be able to speak up and say, this is wrong. Books belong to all of us. We all should have the freedom to read. Next slide, Lisa. So here we're looking at the top. I mean, they used to have a top 10 list that's now grown into 13 titles. And this is, again, what this is about. It's about erasing the visibility of LGBTQ people and especially youth. Because I think the other side knows the power of this visibility and representation. It helps queer youth know that they're not alone. It helps trans youth know that what they're feeling is not so unusual, that other people in what we call the transcestors have been through it before. But it's also an attack on people of color and race and racism and accurate history, as Elisa noted. Next slide. So how do we fight back? What do? We first have to ask a lot of questions. And as we're going through these questions, you may have more questions about how to do it in an effective way. And this is just sort of what GLAAD has picked up from groups that have successfully challenged books and got them returned to the shelves, and groups that have been able to take the tools that GLAAD has as a media advocacy organization and advocate for your own communities and advocate for your own students and your own children. But you can see the different points here along the way of the questions that you should be asking. So you need to know what books are being challenged. You need to figure out who is challenging the books. It might be like an ad hoc collection of parents. When and where is the reconsideration vote being held? Is it open to the public? It probably should be. So you want to figure out who can come to that, who can speak up at that. Does the library and school board have a portal for public comment? Or are they going to have an in-person hearing? How long do people get to speak? What are the steps? So these are all questions you need to kind of sort through as you first hear about a challenge. And you may hear about it, somewhere down the sequence of how these things come down. And sometimes it's reported in the media and sometimes it's not. That's why it's good to have eyes and ears on what your school board's doing and what your library board is doing. And if you hear about a challenge, to be able to know what the next steps in the consideration process should be. Next slide. So this is where your coalition building comes in handy, and you all have done this a lot already. And I thank you again for your advocacy and your ability to organize. You clearly know what you're doing, and now you have to apply it to a new set of challenges. So you want, and some of these people could be the same people, some of them could have dual roles, and some places just don't have as many resources either. So you have to figure out, can you outsource that to a group that's already done research on the book banning groups? So you want to have a task force leader who can help organize and schedule and lead the meetings to leading up to whatever this decisive hearing might be. Hopefully you have an organizer who can research the groups that are behind these book bound challenges. And a lot of times it is like one or two people, but they're fed by these national groups like Moms for Liberty, which GLAAD has been doing some documentation on. They really are a small number of people who are driving the biggest groups of book bans. And so that's what has to kind of come through your messaging, is to know that this is a fringe movement that's very loud and very organized, but we have the numbers and we have a lot more power than they do. We just have to be able to activate it. I think it's also helpful to have a designated writer who can come up with the messaging, who can work with the group to figure out, what do we want to say, what is actually happening, how do we message that out to the public to get their support. You want to have somebody who can organize coordination with the press, because our stories are our superpower. So we have to be able to tell those stories. Books mean this to me. This is why this challenge is harmful to students in my community. Have the students themselves come up with a way to organize their thoughts, if they're hopefully of age to be able to do that, and you don't want to violate their privacy either. You want to have a social media person, obviously, somebody who can help put the word out to say, hey, join us at 7 o'clock at this board meeting. And then it helps to have a graphic designer. I realize that's probably a luxury that we have in this day and age, but find a kid who can create a Canva graphic to be able to say, this is what's happening and this is what we need people to come together around. And that can be designing the logo for your group. It can be putting together the graphic tiles for your social media accounts. Next slide. So here's an example. This is in the town next door to mine. Glen Ridge had a challenge of, I think it was 6 different titles, majority about LGBTQ people, but also some books about sex education. So they created this group. Parents got together, and they were not all queer people. They were not all parents. They were a group of community members who said, we're against book bans. So they created Glen Ridge United Against Book Bans. So this is a way to just be memorable, direct, and conveys the purpose of the group. And they created that cute little graphic with the gas lamps, because apparently Glen Ridge has more gas lights in the US than any other community. So it's a way to say, and then you see the sort of the Progress Pride flame inside. It's like a nice way to convey not only the history of the town, but how they're united against this particular cause. Next slide. So now here we go with the sort of the execution of your organization. You definitely want to figure out, who is this group that's organizing these book bans. It's sometimes under some cute name like Moms for Liberty or Citizens Defending Education, or something that sort of conveys sort of an innocent intention that honestly is just about trying to limit the visibility and acceptance of LGBTQ people and of people of color. So that's why you want to note, if you can find the minutes from previous board meetings, or from maybe they were part of a challenge against CRT or diversity and equity initiatives. These things tend to be a precursor to book ban challenges. And then once you kind of organize those, you can share those out with reporters and say, hey, if you're going to be reporting on this book ban, you might want to know what the history is of the people who are challenging these books. Next slide. So then within your group, you want to be able to sort of organize your speakers, especially as maybe each title might have a slightly different angle or a slightly different group that's the focus of the book ban. So you want to figure out, are there challenged authors who are nearby, or their spokespeople? In Glen Ridge, for example, we were able to get, excuse me, the mom and aunts of George M. Johnson, who is a New Jersey native and wrote All Boys Aren't Blue. And we just asked them, would George be able to come to this meeting of the library board And George lives on the West Coast now. And they said, no, but my mom might be able to. I was like, well, there's nothing more powerful than a mom speaking up for her challenged kid. So, and it actually was great. If you go to George's Instagram account, you can see how they spoke up for him. And so George wrote a statement, and then they read George's statement at the hearing. But you also want to figure out who are your allies, who are the parents who are good speakers, who are the student leaders, who are the teachers and librarians who have the expertise and can speak in, very factual, very objective terms about the harms of book bans. You want to try to engage school alumni who are probably horrified that this is going on. You want to engage local leadership. You want to try to bring in local business and organizational leaders who will be able to say, this is harmful to the community. It's harmful to the reputation of the town. It's especially harmful to vulnerable people. And I found that it was really powerful to have a coalition of clergy and mental health professionals to be able to say, this is what is really going on here. These are the facts of what we know about what it's like growing up in a marginalized group. And then giving that message to the media to be able to say in an op-ed or in an essay or at the hearing itself, this is why we're speaking out against what's going on here. Next slide. So then these are sort of how you start to create your messaging and how you then start to distribute that to the world. You want to have a statement of who, what, when, where, and why of the hearing, but also like why your group is needed, why you're speaking up now, what are the core values that you're speaking up for. It's the freedom to read, it's the freedom to be ourselves, it's the protecting vulnerable youth from people who think that the vulnerable youth don't know what they're talking about or don't know who they are. They usually do. You want to try to create a sign-on letter or a petition to introduce the campaign and try to get people to move on it. Not only sign, but show up. Not only sign, but maybe come to the hearing. And maybe they don't want to speak, but having their presence there would be valuable. And it's kind of helpful to have it in a document that everybody can access and add to, and then you can kind of figure out who might be able to say what and cover what angle at the different hearings. Next slide. And then this looks like a long checklist, but anybody who manages any social media account will tell you this is kind of what is the daily work of it. Is you create the account with a nice, easy to remember handle. You keep the posts memorable and positive. You share quotes from your essay from the mental health professional. You tell your followers, meet us at 6 o'clock for pizza and brainstorm. You say, we're having a virtual meeting with the UltraViolet team. This is a way to kind of just communicate with people more broadly. Ideally, you're able to create it in a way that everybody can see it, but only you're able to kind of manage it so that you can kind of keep track of who's following you and who's keeping track, and you can alert press to it. We go back and forth about the best way to kind of keep press informed about what's going on, and most of them are pretty hip and can follow an Instagram account. Twitter's become kind of a bit of a challenge lately, but if that works for your community and most of the people in your coalition, then by all means use that and figure out a way to maximize the reach of that. And then this is also super helpful, is the Linktree account, which you can link to from your Instagram account. So then you can post that article or that op-ed that's in your local paper. You can link to a study that talks about the number of book bans and what they're really about. So it's just kind of helpful as another way of organizing your information that you're putting out. Next slide. So then once you organize, then you have to prepare your program for the night of this decisive hearing. You want to be able to figure out who has a good story and who has a good message to be able to share with the press. You also want to do your due diligence in seeking out the press and figuring out who's been covering this issue in a responsible and accurate way. Who's covered a book ban in the town next door, who's covered a book challenge at a library in another state, if you want to do it more than just regionally. You want to be able to figure out who can distribute the logistics of trying to get your visible campaign going, your t-shirts, your lawn signs, who's ordering those, who's helping distribute them. And then somebody, this is really important too, is to kind of monitor the book banners media presence too, because they're doing the same. They're creating their own messaging and they're creating their own campaigns and they're telling their organizers to show up and say this or that. So you want to figure out, what are they saying? How do you counter that with what your people are saying? Next slide. And now, this is where it kind of gets down to brass tacks. You figure out, like, where is the hearing happening? How much time does each speaker get? Who can come? Like, it's like you're planning a party, but it's not as much fun. It's about, who can show up and speak up, and how do you organize and prioritize that list? Like in Glen Ridge, it was whoever came and signed up first, and they were able to figure out, like, okay, we're going to stagger the line so that it was supposed to be 2 microphones. It was going to be in 2 lines, and then they combined the lines, but it worked out just fine because they were kind of able to do it on the fly, where let's say speaker 4, was going to talk about this particular book, and that got flipped. They were just able to do it that night. And but it helps to know what the rules of the road are going to be about that. You want to maybe put in a spreadsheet what the different remarks are, so people don't repeat information, or can at least know what's been said before they come up, so that the board hears slightly different angles, slightly different personal information that can be persuasive. And then you want to figure out what you want to say after the vote. And it could be, you could prepare it both ways. Books get reinstated, votes indecisive, or the books don't get reinstated. In any case, you want to be able to still be able to put out a message that shows support for the right to read for the people who need to see these stories and want to see themselves on the shelves. Next slide. So then this is how you help increase visibility. Jay, very nicely, I said, can you make all these colors, one color? And they were able to do that, but it just to have like a visual presence behind the speaker to show, like, these are the people who are in solidarity showing up against this book ban. You want to be mindful of how much time you have. You want to make sure that each speaker has at least given a run through with somebody and put it to time, so that you can make your points as succinctly as possible. And then obviously you want to be as respectful as possible, and hopefully that will be heard by the board and other decisive bodies, and the public at large too. Don't forget, the court of public opinion is important too. Next slide. So then this is, you've done your part. You want to thank everybody. You want to update everybody on social media. You want to distribute your press release. If the hearing has an outcome that you did not want, that you remain organized and you figure out your next steps together, that you continue to put out your messaging, that you keep an eye on the groups that were able to organize against you, that you then take it to the next step about legislation if it needs to go to that level. And remain involved. It's kind of, this is just a starter pack of community organizing, and it can be applied to almost anything that's happening. And we don't know what the next step might be. And here in New Jersey, there's been book challenges that books got returned to the shelves, and then the main book banning groups then ran for school board or ran for library board. So they never quite go away. Unfortunately, I think that they just test the waters and see how it's received and what kind of power they might be able to latch onto. So it's just helpful to stay close as a group and be able to keep an eye on what's happening and how you might help other communities, or how you might keep an eye on the particular groups that are fighting for book bans, because as Elisa noted, like, there's a lot of overlap between other issues of ways that they're, it's hard to say, but they're manipulating the political system to their gain, and they're exposing a vulnerability, hoping that the people who really care, and the majority of which we are, won't show up. And this is a way of saying we're always going to show up no matter what the issue is. Next slide. So then this is just the numerous resources that we have at our disposal to be able to figure out how to do this, how we helped create the toolkit, and we'll share the links to the toolkit itself. So this just kind of is the broad strokes of how to organize, but within the toolkit, we have templates to help write a press release. We have a media alert. We have an op-ed example. We have letters to the editor, just the different ways of getting your message across. And it sounds daunting, but when you try to break it down into smaller steps, it's more achievable, especially as you share the work with your comrades. I think that might be it, right, Lisa? Yeah, and then if you have any questions or anything, you can always reach out to GLAAD, press@glaad.org, and that goes to our press team. And we can help brainstorm with you, or we can help you with research. We can help connect you with local leaders that you may not know personally, and or celebrity authors like George M. Johnson. That's it. I can take people's questions.
Thank you, by the way, Barbara. I mean, that was a really comprehensive, as a longtime organizer and just really creatively presented. Thank you for that.
Sure. No, it's very inspiring to work with advocates and people who are passionate enough to show up on a Tuesday night in the summer because they know that this is an important issue. So thank you.
Yes, and as Kathy noted in the chat, folks can put questions in the chat itself. There's also a Q&A button, and or you can raise your virtual hand and we can call on you.
Barbara, while we wait for other questions, can I ask, I know you mentioned an op-ed, do you feel like letters to the editor are also helpful? Or if you want to talk, I don't know if everyone knows the difference between those two. And then I was also thinking about, I know some places like there's not as much of a local paper, and then what you would suggest as an alternative.
Yes, very good questions. So depending on the outlet, you can write a letter to the editor that's in response to a particular article. So let's say the article is about, Citizens for Education has decided to ban 6 books, and they kind of lay out the facts of whatever. So then you can write an article or write a letter that's in response directly to that article, and each paper has a slightly different set of rules around that. Like it has to be within a week's time of the original piece posting. It has to be under so many words. It has to be from somebody within the community itself. Like that, you have to kind of figure out, do I have enough to say that could get across in like a short memo to the editor? An op-ed is a little more labor intensive. It's usually longer. It's more of you're telling the story of what you're trying to say rather than in response to something in particular. Like it still can be in response, but it's a little bit more connected and a little bit richer. And it takes a little bit longer to try to get that placed. Although some papers are very good about having a space for community voices, and they're eager to have content, and they want people to engage with the paper as much as possible. So it's a matter of trying to figure out what works best in your community. For the communities that have had, the local news decimation is real, and a lot of places are just picking up wire stories like the Associated Press or Reuters, and they don't really have a local news presence. There's usually still, depending on the market, there's usually still like a hyper local news outlet. You just have to figure out where that is, or someone very active in your Facebook moms and dads group who can serve as sort of the de facto media presence there. It's a tricky thing because I realize, like, especially across the South, where Gannett papers have kind of gobbled up a lot of the local news, and they just kind of tend to carry the same news that's not specific to the local community. So I think it's just a matter of doing a little bit of research and figuring out what works in your community. And sometimes, traditional media is not the way to go because people don't go to it because they recognize that it doesn't really speak to them anymore. So who does? And maybe it's the local news TV station, or maybe it's like a college paper or something like that might be more relevant to the people in town.
Words of appreciation are starting to come in for you, Barbara. And we do have a question from Roseanne. Do you find it is better to try to appeal to the Board of Education first, and if no response, should go to your state legislators when it comes to the book bans in schools and libraries?
Great question. I think it depends on where the challenge is. Like if you're just hearing about it, or like if you just heard that the challenge is being considered, you have to go to the body that's considering it. If it's the library who's reconsidering it, you have to figure out, is the library director on the board? Sometimes there's like a director and then a board above the director who kind of regulates what goes on there. So it just takes a little bit of research to figure out like who the best person is. And I know that sometimes, like for school boards and things like that, they prefer that you kind of go up their chain of command. So like, let's say you hear about a book ban that's happening at your kid's elementary school. Go to that librarian, go to that vice principal, go to that principal, then go to the district. You know, you kind of have to work your way up. And I think that if it comes down to the board that's making that decision, then figure out like, who can we talk to and how do we get our voices heard? And is it going to be in a public comment hearing? And what's the best way to show up at that? And how do we make sure that we are pulling in the right voices to discuss that? Because I do feel like schools are so local, like, you know, it might be something you could resolve within the school, but if schools are doing their job and the school boards are doing their job, they have a reconsideration process in place, and they should be able to tell you what that is, and just keep asking questions until you get an answer. And sometimes it might be posted in the student handbook. Sometimes it might be within the district sort of communications, district-wide communications. But if it's a huge district, they may not know about every single book ban challenge just yet. So it's a little bit of asking enough questions and figuring out who's the decision maker here and how do we get in front of that person or body.
And then building on Roseanne's question, what is the role of the state legislature in this issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So each state's a little bit different, but for the most part, it's super local, that each school board can operate independently within the state mandates, like the Department of Education. So, but like there's no real oversight of school boards, at least not that I've heard of, where the ultimate oversight and accountability is at the ballot box. So you have to know when there's school board elections and when there's library board elections, and you have to keep showing up to the school board hearings and library board hearings to hear what is going on and how to make sure that they're following the protocol. That was another troubling stat that we found, is that so many school boards have a protocol, but they don't follow it. They don't follow the proper procedure. They don't, or they're like in what happened in Florida in the Panhandle. They had the hearings, the body that decides whether or not the books should be banned or not banned decided the books shouldn't be banned, and the school board banned them anyway. So, and that's why like Pen America and Random House filed suit. So they saw that the protocols and the things that are in place in order to give each book its the review that it deserves of literary merit, of educational merit, of social merit, that the experts are the ones who should be deciding that, not an elected body. And that's why you have experts who are choosing books and offering educational materials, and they still get overruled. So it's just helpful to know what is the ultimate accountability here. And like in New Jersey, and I feel like in Illinois and maybe a couple other places, they've started to hone in on this issue. And in Illinois, I think it just happened last week, where they said libraries have to follow the proper protocol for reviewing challenged books, or those libraries won't get state funding. Mm-hmm. So it's one way of, holding libraries more accountable and schools more accountable to the review process that usually have been in place for years, but are now being kind of abused by these different groups that are coming in and saying, we want to ban every book that has the word queer in it. That's like, it's not really the school board's place to do that, but they can use the system against the books to be able to say, we want these books out of commission, and here's a way to get them out, even if, as they're being reviewed, they're still being banned.
Yes, Terry from Texas said in Texas, the legislature supports book bans.
Texas is so wild. And I mean, I don't think every lawmaker in Texas does, but I hear what you're saying, Terry. And I think that it's a matter of trying to find the lawmakers who are able to speak out against it, and trying to work with them to elevate those voices. And again, through the press, being able to say, listen, Texas and other places may have a super majority, but it doesn't mean that there's not voices out here who are speaking out against it. We have a really good student advocate in Texas too, who was able to, they weren't able to stop a book ban, but they were able to free up the student or campus Wi-Fi or something. Like it was a really convoluted tech angle, but they were able to get that knocked down. That it became a free speech issue, that they're squeezing off the internet just for the queer stuff and not for the other stuff, and they were able to get that knocked down.
Roseanne said in the chat, my grandson's school has a bunch of parents who are trying to get the school and its library to implement a program that I thought was reasonable, but they are still arguing over it. The school just wants to ban books. The parents want a better way to give the school a way to keep the books.
Yeah, I feel like the people who are banning books are constantly complaining that they don't want the government telling them what to do. And yet they're out there trying to take away people's rights to be able to choose what their kids read. So I think the more dialogue around that very issue is super important, to be able to make sure that all parents' points of view are being considered. Oh yeah, thank you, Sharon. Yes, that just happened.
And then I don't remember mention of the library staff being able to help with the American Library Association contacting to find people elsewhere who have dealt with similar situations or objectors.
Yeah, I don't have personal experience with that. I know that they're dealing with so many challenges that having them help with each one would be overly taxing on their smallish staff. But I do feel like they try to at least organize responses, and then they're able to point people to that either on their website or the ALA's website. They're usually pretty good, but it's just very difficult to have them be your point of contact for every single thing that happens. But it is helpful to know that when objections have happened, that they're able to be overturned and to kind of apply the lessons of what worked there to your own situation.
And related, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to Sharon's point about Arkansas, and the same thing happened in Tennessee with the drag ban, is that eventually, as these things wind through the courts, they are proven unconstitutional, that it is unconstitutional to ban certain books, that it's a freedom of speech issue and the drag issue, and that, with the gender affirming care, it's the same. This is just about removing people's private rights to decide what they want to do with their own bodies and their children's futures. So it's what we are trying to do is motivate people before it even gets proposed, and be able to challenge through the vote, through other means, to be able to say, where do you stand on this, on whose behalf are you going to be advocating? Are you advocating for the families who are living this experience, and for the healthcare providers, or are you going to be advocating for an outside group that's kind of trying to come in and take healthcare away? It's an important question. I wish more people would ask it as they're making their vote decisions.
Any last minute burning questions before we get into our action? Well, for what it's worth, I had attended a similar discussion with Kimberly Crenshaw about the challenges to critical race theory. And her panel had suggested people running for the school board and the importance of us getting those seats. And I can just say, I know that as a mom organizer, the time commitment, but just to know you can bring your kids to these local rallies and these local events and still get involved.
He's absolutely right. I mean, it just takes enough of the mainstream voices speaking up and advocating, and being willing to take the time to do it. I wish more people would run for everything, and I realize that everybody's time is very strapped. It's just the fringe is a lot louder and better organized, and they care more, and we just need everybody to care as much as they do to be able to get the the support, and especially for the vulnerable people who don't, like, a lot of parents don't have time to go and advocate, and they count on other people to be able to speak up on their behalf. I mean, you may not have a queer kid, but you have friends who have queer kids. Or you may just believe in every kid's right to read. It's just whatever way you can do it. And our boss says you don't have to chomp the whole apple. You just have to take your own bite out of it to be able to apply your talent and do what you can to chip away at it. And it's like every little bit definitely counts. Every voice counts.
Yes, and even if you're not a parent, still consider those school board positions, show up at those school board meetings. You are a member of the community, you pay taxes. Definitely
Absolutely.
your voice. Mhm. So what do you have, what next? Like if we want to build on our momentum and organize on our side, what can we do even now as the UltraViolet and GLAAD community?
Well, I recommend you go to GLAAD.org, and I'll drop the link in the chat where the toolkit is, and you can download it and read it, and you can take different pieces of it to apply to whatever organizing you need to do. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I think that's we have lots of different resources there about not only books but other issues of representation in schools and everywhere. And I feel like it's like a community-wide event to have people who are just willing to commit their time to make sure that everyone's voices are understood.
And Kathy is now cutting and pasting those resources in the chat. I also wanted to remind folks that so we had recently gone out on a petition at against Target for basically hiding their Pride merchandise and even removing Pride merchandise from shelves in certain stores in the South due to bullying. And we are about, thank you all, tens of thousands of you have already taken action, and we're about to deliver those signatures to Target. So if you have not signed this particular petition, I am putting it in the chat as well. All LGBTQ plus, if we want to see the culture change, we need to have all LGBTQ plus representation everywhere, including in our retail stores. See, what else do we have for folks?
I see Scotty.
Let me try another link. It pasted weird. I apologize. Let me see if I can get it in a better way.
The other link in there is to this really awesome resource called Book Riot, and they put out a weekly roundup of the different censorship efforts that are going on around the country. And I find it really interesting to see the different patterns. Like it's definitely not a local issue, because the same things are happening in South Carolina that are happening in Pennsylvania, that are happening in California. It's definitely a more national organized effort for the book bans. So it's just kind of interesting to see what the different language is being used that's similar place to place, and trying to figure out how to, I'm not saying we need to organize in each of these places, because that would be, we'd be at it all night, but that each community can figure out, well, this isn't just us, and this may not be even represent our community. This is just a national effort against rising visibility and rising acceptance. And how do we as a community speak up against that? And it's just kind of interesting to kind of keep tabs on that.
That's a great point about using those same tools across various, we see actually our opposition do that very well, rather than thinking of it as each local one, creating something from scratch.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The Washington Post actually examined several challenges, like maybe 1,000 or so, and looked at the challenge documents that were handwritten out. And it comes from just a small number of people who are actively looking to challenge the same list of books that's been challenged elsewhere. I mean, it's just very hard to believe that moms in each of these communities have suddenly stumbled upon genderqueer. Like, I just think that, you know, they're seeing it somewhere, and then they feel motivated to move against it in their own communities. And this is sort of how the censorship movement has evolved in recent years, is that they're able to share that information so much faster, whereas in the past it was like, oh, you may have stumbled upon it on a table or a pride display or something, and it's like that one thing that one mom or whoever saw at the library. This is a lot more coordinated than that. It's a lot more nefarious, and it's a lot easier to share that way. So it's just really up to each community to be able to say, this is not a grassroots thing that's coming from the community. Yep. This is coming from elsewhere.
That's such a great point. And we find that across like all our issue areas, whether it's anti-abortion or even on disinformation. Like there's a few super spreaders, but you know, so that's why it's important to identify the sources.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a really good way to put it, is that it is a cluster almost of the list makers, and then they kind of disperse that out to their various different chapters, but it doesn't represent what the community values are, and it doesn't represent the majority in those communities, but they're counting on people's complacency or lack of connection to it, and they're like, this is so weird, this is suddenly coming out of our community, but they're counting on that lack of action to be able to move that agenda forward. And it's a much bigger fight than that. It's like as a connected, you know, all like the care bands and the book bands and the sports bands, they all kind of have that same connected tissue of just trying to squash the access to society of marginalized people. And it needs a community-wide response to be able to push back and say, we're not going to stand for that here.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, well, it sounds like, and we're doing this already, unmasking who those folks are, like the Moms for Liberty. Let's see. So in closing, I just wanted to let everyone here know that we will follow up with the resources that were shared in this meeting, including Barbara's presentation. I also wanted to give everyone a sneak peek at the topic for next month's Real Talk UV, which is Disability Pride Month. We plan to have a guest speaker as well as take collective action with our disabled movement comrades. So we hope you will join us. And thank you again, Barbara, so much for that presentation and for giving us your time during Pride Month. Out of all
happy to. No, it's good. I mean, Pride Month kind of cuts both ways. It's nice to have people paying attention. We just wish it would last like every other month too. So we're happy to take the audience when we can get it. And we thank you all for coming and caring about it, because it really does take all of us.
Well, happy
Pride
Month all. And thank you
all
so much. We will see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.